Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. Today we're going to be focusing on
Chevron.
CVX,
Yeah.
right? Based on a collection of analyses that you shared with us.
Okay.
And we're trying to really kind of pull out the important takeaways
Gotcha.
to give you a clear picture of what's influencing their stock.
Makes sense.
So we have a bunch of information here, looking at the energy market as a whole,
Right.
some of the recent decisions the company has made,
Okay.
how their finances are looking, and then some technical analysis as well.
Wonderful. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So let's kick things off by talking about the big picture, right? The global energy market.
Okay.
It's in a state of flux right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of volatility.
Right.
And this is due to a number of factors. We've got geopolitical events.
I was going to say, that's got to be...
Oh, a big one.
Exactly. Think about political tensions between those countries that produce a lot of oil.
Right.
Or, even major global conflicts that can really disrupt the supply chains.
Oh, of course. We've also got disruptions to those supply chains, how things are moved around the world.
Right.
And then we're also seeing this shift in what kind of energy is in demand.
Interesting.
So as you might imagine, Chevron being a major player in this space,
Right.
their stock is naturally sensitive to all these changes happening in the market.
Makes sense.
This is kind of the backdrop against which we have to understand Chevron's specific situation.
Okay. So, with that backdrop in mind,
Yeah.
let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Okay.
This whole decision by Chevron to move their headquarters
Right.
from California to Houston, Texas.
Huge move.
Big move. I mean,
Yeah.
this is going to be done by January 2025.
Yeah.
And this strategic shift, it has a lot of implications for the company.
Definitely.
Obviously, there's the cost savings of operating in Texas,
Of course.
but it also kind of signals, them wanting to be at the heart of the U.S. energy sector.
Absolutely.
And it might make it easier to collaborate with other companies in the industry and to attract talent that specializes in oil and gas.
Makes sense.
And all of this really affects how investors perceive the stock.
For sure.
So, how are their finances looking in light of all this?
Let's look at the numbers. So the reports are showing that Chevron had a really solid financial year in 2023.
Okay.
They posted a revenue of $200.9 billion
That's huge.
and a net income of $21.37 billion.
Wow.
So typically when a company shows strong financial results like that,
Right.
it tends to support their stock price.
Okay.
It suggests that there's some underlying stability there.
So this is where things get pretty interesting, I think, for a lot of our listeners.
Okay.
Especially for those who are looking for income from their investments.
Right.
Chevron's dividend yield is something to really consider.
Oh, definitely.
Just a reminder to our listeners, dividend yield is basically the annual dividend payment
Right.
as a percentage of the stock's current price.
Exactly.
So we're looking at a 4.51% yield based on the past data. And then estimates are putting it at 4.59% moving forward.
Gotcha.
So, for every $100 you invest,
Right.
you could potentially get back about $4.50
Per year, right?
per year in dividends. Exactly.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
Now those yields, they're pretty competitive, right?
Very much so.
And that can make the stock much more attractive to investors.
Definitely.
And it can even help stabilize the price.
That's right.
One thing, though, that your sources don't really get into is Chevron's dividend history.
Ah,
Like, have they been consistently paying dividends?
I see.
What's their track record like?
Right.
And they also don't touch upon the payout ratio,
Which is...
which tells us how much of their earnings they're actually paying out as dividends.
Gotcha.
So, looking into those metrics would give us a better sense of whether those dividends are sustainable
Absolutely.
and whether Chevron is committed to returning that capital to the shareholder.
Especially in a volatile energy market like we talked about. Important considerations.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears here a little bit and dive into the technical indicators.
That's good.
So looking at recent data, Chevron's stock is currently sitting at $158.72.
Okay.
We've seen a bit of an uptrend lately with a 2.22% increase in just the past 24 hours.
Interesting.
And over the past year, the stock's traded between a low of $135.37
Okay.
and a high of $171.70.
All right.
Now, in terms of trading volume, the average number of Chevron shares traded each day is about 7.4 million.
Okay.
We don't have the exact recent volume in front of us,
Right.
but this recent price increase could indicate that there's more trading activity than usual.
That makes sense. So where do we go from here?
Well, before we get into recommendations,
Okay.
it's important to point out that the technical data we have is a little limited.
Okay.
Specifically, we don't have figures for the short-term 50-day moving average
Oh, I see.
or the long-term 200-day moving average. And we're also missing the relative strength index.
So for our listeners who may not be familiar with those,
Sure.
can you kind of break down what those indicators tell us?
Absolutely. So
Right.
the 200-day moving average is a really key indicator for long-term trends.
Okay.
If the stock price consistently stays above that 200-day moving average,
Right.
it's usually a sign of underlying strength in the stock.
Okay.
Now, the 50-day average, on the other hand,
Yeah.
being a shorter-term indicator, helps us identify those more immediate trends
I see.
and potential shifts in momentum.
Okay.
And the RSI, or the Relative Strength Index,
Right.
that helps investors understand if a stock might be overbought.
Okay.
So above a reading of 70 typically means the price has gone up too quickly
Right.
and might be due for a pullback,
Makes sense.
or oversold, which is below 30,
Okay.
which suggests the price may have dropped too far
Interesting.
and might be poised for a bounce back.
So even though we're missing some of that data,
Yeah.
what does the technical analysis tell us so far?
Right. So despite those gaps, some of your sources actually point to some potentially positive signs.
Okay.
They mentioned an ABCD pattern
Okay.
and positive turns in Midas and oscillators.
Now, again, for our listeners who might not be familiar with those,
Sure.
what are those telling us?
So an ABCD pattern, it's a specific price structure
Okay.
that technical analysts look for because it can signal potential price reversals.
Okay.
Like it might suggest that a downtrend is about to become an uptrend,
Gotcha.
or vice versa.
Okay.
Similarly, Midas and oscillators, these are tools
Okay.
that help measure the strength and momentum of price movements.
Okay.
And positive turns in those could mean that buying pressure is increasing,
Interesting.
which could drive the price up.
Okay, so it sounds like there are some positive signs,
There are.
but we're still missing some key information.
They are.
So what are the analysts recommending at this point?
Right. So when we look at the recommendations coming out of these technical analyses,
Yes.
we see some differences. One analysis suggests a buy,
Okay.
particularly for investors looking for short-term gains.
Gotcha.
You know, those who want to capitalize on that recent upward momentum we talked about.
So jump in now, make a quick buck, and jump back out.
Exactly.
Oh.
But another analysis leans towards a hold recommendation.
Interesting.
And this seems to be mainly because we don't have all the technical information.
Right, those missing pieces.
Exactly, like
Yeah.
those moving averages and the RSI.
Yeah, makes sense.
So for those investors who are in it for the long haul
Right.
and who are satisfied with how Chevron is performing right now
Mhm.
and with that dividend that we discussed,
Right.
holding on to the stock might be a reasonable approach.
Okay.
Now, a sell recommendation might be considered
Okay.
if the stock price approaches those upper resistance levels.
Rough.
We talked about that high of $171.70.
Gotcha. So if it gets close to that.
Yeah, if it starts getting close to that level,
Right.
it might signal that it's time to sell. Or if we see some negative developments in the energy sector as a whole,
That would definitely impact things.
that could definitely impact Chevron's prospects
Okay.
and might make it a less appealing investment.
So we've really pieced together a picture of Chevron's current situation here.
We have.
But it's really important for our listeners to remember
Yes,
that this is all based on the limited data we have available.
absolutely. This is just a snapshot
Right.
based on what you've shared.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And these analyses should not be taken as, direct investment advice.
No, absolutely not.
Informed investment decisions require a much deeper dive.
Of course.
They should be looking at fundamental analysis more closely,
Absolutely.
staying up to date with market news,
Right.
and ideally consulting with a qualified financial advisor.
Someone who understands their financial situation.
Yeah, and their goals.
Exactly.
So to recap, your sources are suggesting that Chevron is operating in a really dynamic energy market, which is characterized by both volatility and those shifts in demand.
That's right.
They've made a significant strategic decision to relocate their headquarters,
Yeah,
which could have long-term implications for the company.
for sure.
And all of this is happening after a year of really strong financial performance.
Right.
And they're offering a pretty attractive dividend yield.
Yeah, for those income-seeking investors.
Exactly. Now, from a technical analysis standpoint, there are some potentially bullish signals emerging,
There are.
but we just can't make a definitive recommendation without more complete data.
That's right. We need more information.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So we hope that this breakdown has been helpful for you,
I hope so.
and that it provides a valuable perspective on all the information that you shared with us regarding Chevron.
Me too.
If you found this helpful, please subscribe, like, and comment to let us know what other topics you'd like us to cover.
And let us know if you have any questions.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye.